The year is 1683. Europe trembles as the unstoppable Ottoman Empire marches westward with an army so vast that it darkens the horizon. At its head rides Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha, entrusted by Sultan Mehmed IV with a singular mission to capture Vienna, the glittering heart of the Holy Roman Empire. For centuries, East and West have stood divided, but here, on the blood-soaked plains of Vienna, the fate of continents will be decided. Will Europe fall under the crescent banner of the Ottomans, or will Christendom survive this final reckoning? Chapter 1: The Ottoman Dream of Europe. For over 2 centuries, the Ottoman Empire had been the unrivaled superpower of the world. With Constantinople transformed into Istanbul, the empire stretched across 3 continents, controlling trade routes, wealth, and influence unmatched by any other nation. But the ambitions of the sultans had always looked westward, to the fertile lands of Europe and the grandeur of cities like Vienna. Sultan Mehmed IV saw the conquest of Vienna as more than a strategic victory, it was destiny. The Ottomans believed that once Vienna fell, Germany, France, and Italy would soon follow, cementing the empire's dominance over Europe itself. Vienna wasn't just a city, it was the gateway to Western civilization, and its fall would mark the dawn of a new Ottoman Europe. But beneath the surface of imperial glory, whispers of dissent and overextension brewed within the empire. Taking Vienna would require more than just numbers. It would demand flawless strategy, unity among allies, and divine favor. And so, Sultan Mehmed IV placed his trust in his Grand Vizier, Kara Mustafa Pasha, whose ambition rivaled that of the empire itself. Chapter 2: The Road to Vienna. In early 1683, the Ottoman war machine stirred to life. Under Kara Mustafa's command, an army of nearly 150,000 men gathered, a force so immense that villages emptied and markets thrived to supply it. This was the largest Ottoman expeditionary force ever assembled, a symbol of imperial pride and overwhelming power. The army moved like a living tide, crossing the Danube River and cutting a path through Hungary with terrifying speed. Towns fell one by one, fortresses surrendered without a fight, and the Habsburg Empire seemed powerless to resist. Vienna lay vulnerable, defended by old walls and a modest garrison. Yet, as the Ottomans advanced, their confidence became their weakness. Kara Mustafa delayed assaults, choosing to starve Vienna rather than storm it directly. Every day lost would later prove costly, for across Europe, alarm bells rang and alliances began to form. Chapter 3: Vienna prepares for the storm. Inside Vienna's walls, fear was palpable. The city, home to fewer than 20,000 defenders, faced an army nearly 8 times its size. Emperor Leopold I fled to safety, leaving Count Ernst Rudiger von Starhemberg to organize the defense. The odds were impossible, yet surrender was unthinkable. The Viennese worked tirelessly, strengthening crumbling fortifications, digging trenches, and stockpiling food and ammunition. Citizens, men, women, and even children were enlisted to build barricades and prepare for the inevitable siege. As church bells tolled, prayers echoed through the streets, mingling with the pounding of hammers on stone. Count Starhemberg knew that time was their greatest weapon. If Vienna could hold out long enough, relief might arrive from the north. But until then, the defenders would stand alone, surrounded by the might of the Ottoman Empire. As the skies filled with smoke and the earth trembled beneath the march of foreign armies. Chapter 4: Clash of Civilizations. The Siege of Vienna was more than a battle. It was the symbolic collision of worlds. For centuries, Europe and the Ottomans had exchanged ideas, goods, and culture. Yet, on the battlefield, these exchanges turned into enmity. The siege became a war of faith, identity, and destiny. To the Ottomans, Vienna represented the pinnacle of Christian resistance. To conquer it would fulfill the ancient dream of Ottoman supremacy across Europe. For the defenders, however, the city was the last bastion of Christendom. Its fall would open the gates to Germany, France, and possibly Rome itself. The psychological stakes were immense. Every soldier, whether Christian or Muslim, believed they were fighting not just for land, but for the soul of civilization. Cannons roared like thunder, prayers rose from both camps, and the Danube plains became an arena where East and West collided in a struggle that would define history. Chapter 5. The siege begins on July 14, 1683. Kara Mustafa encircled Vienna with his vast army, cutting off supply lines and isolating the city from the world. Siege towers were constructed, trenches dug, and hundreds of cannons positioned to bombard the ancient walls day and night. Within days, the city's defenses began to crumble under relentless fire. Starhemberg and his men fought fiercely, repairing breaches in the walls, even as Ottoman sappers dug tunnels beneath them, planting explosives that shattered stone and spirit alike. The defenders lived in a constant rhythm of battle, exhaustion, and dread. Disease spread rapidly within the besieged city. Food supplies dwindled, water became scarce, and starvation loomed. Yet the defenders' resolve remained unbroken. Every passing day became a victory in itself, buying precious time for Europe to rally its forces against the Ottoman tide. Chapter 6. Kara Mustafa's Gamble. Kara Mustafa Pasha envisioned a triumphal entry into Vienna, one that would rival the conquests of Mehmed the Conqueror in Constantinople. But his pride became his downfall, refusing to allow his soldiers to loot or destroy the city. He ordered a slow, methodical siege instead of an overwhelming assault. This decision, meant to preserve Vienna's treasures, inadvertently granted Europe time to assemble a coalition army. Across the continent, messengers carried desperate pleas for aid, and one nation after another pledged their support against the Ottoman advance. By early September, a powerful relief force, led by King Jan III Sobieski of Poland, was on the march. Kara Mustafa's hesitation had transformed what could have been a swift victory into a precarious gamble that threatened the empire's grand ambitions. Chapter 7. The Holy League rises across Europe. The fall of Vienna threatened more than Austrian sovereignty. It jeopardized the entire balance of power. The Holy Roman Empire pleaded for aid, and in response, Pope Innocent XI forged an unprecedented alliance known as the Holy League. For the first time in decades, Catholic and Protestant rulers put aside their divisions to face a common enemy. Among the most significant contributors was King Jan III Sobieski of Poland, a brilliant tactician and devout Catholic who recognized the gravity of Vienna's plight. He pledged to march his forces across hundreds of miles to confront the Ottomans head-on, commanding one of Europe's most formidable cavalry units, the legendary Winged Hussars. This alliance represented more than military cooperation. It was a symbol of European unity in the face of annihilation. As news of Sobieski's march spread, hope began to stir within the battered walls of Vienna. Yet the relief force would need to act quickly, for time was running out, and the Ottomans tightened their grip with every passing day. Chapter 8: Vienna on the brink. By early September, Vienna teetered on the edge of collapse. Ottoman sappers had tunneled beneath the walls, planting explosives that tore massive breaches through the city's defenses. Fires raged through the streets, food stores dwindled to crumbs, and disease claimed dozens of lives each day. Inside the walls, Count Starhemberg urged his men to fight on, knowing that surrender meant slaughter. The defenders, exhausted and malnourished, fought every hour to repel Ottoman advances. Families hid in cellars, praying as the roar of cannons became the city's constant lullaby. Every day of resistance was bought with blood, yet Vienna's survival depended entirely on one thing: Sobieski's arrival. If the relief army failed to reach them in time, the city would fall, and with it, the future of Europe would be rewritten. Chapter 9. The alliance arrives on the night of September 11th, 1683. The combined forces of the Holy League finally reached the hills surrounding Vienna. Atop the Kahlenberg Heights, King Sobieski surveyed the battlefield, illuminated by the glow of burning suburbs and Ottoman campfires. The relief army, numbering 70,000 soldiers, was a patchwork of nations. Polish, Austrian, Bavarian, Saxon, and German troops stood shoulder to shoulder. Though divided by language and politics, they were united by necessity. Vienna's fall would mean Europe's collapse, and each soldier knew this was a battle they could not afford to lose. Sobieski devised a daring plan: attack from the heights, overwhelm the Ottoman flanks, and launch a decisive cavalry charge into the heart of their army. The plan was risky, but the alternative was unthinkable: letting Vienna burn. Chapter 10. The Battle of September 12th. At dawn, the Battle of Vienna began. The Holy League's infantry descended from the hills, clashing with Ottoman forces entrenched around the city. Muskets cracked, pikes shattered, and the cries of thousands filled the air as the two great powers collided. The Ottomans initially resisted fiercely, their cannons and janissaries holding back wave after wave of attackers. Yet the tide slowly began to turn as European forces gained ground. Kara Mustafa, caught off guard by the relief army's speed, struggled to reorganize his forces in the chaos. By afternoon, the Ottomans found themselves fighting a war on two fronts: against Vienna's defenders within the walls, and Sobieski's coalition army outside them. The balance of power was shifting, but Kara Mustafa still had faith in his overwhelming numbers. Chapter 11. The largest cavalry charge in history. As the sun began to set, King Jan Sobieski unleashed his most devastating weapon: the Polish Winged Hussars. Over 18,000 heavy cavalrymen, adorned with towering wooden wings that whistled in the wind, thundered down the slopes of the Kahlenberg Heights. The ground shook beneath their hooves, and the sky seemed to vibrate with the roar of the charge. Ottoman lines buckled under the sheer weight and speed of the assault, and panic began to ripple through Kara Mustafa's ranks. No force in Europe had ever witnessed such power and precision unleashed in a single strike. Within moments, the Ottoman center collapsed. Soldiers abandoned their positions, retreating in chaos as the Holy League forces surged forward. What began as a siege now transformed into a rout, and the fate of the empire's grand ambitions unraveled in an instant. Chapter 12. Kara Mustafa's defeat. By nightfall, the Ottoman camp descended into complete chaos. Kara Mustafa, once poised to deliver the greatest victory in Ottoman history, now faced an impossible reality. The once mighty army disintegrated into scattered groups fleeing across the Danube. Vienna's gates opened, and Starhemberg's battered defenders poured out to join the counterattack, striking at the retreating Ottomans. Fires consumed the abandoned Ottoman encampments, and the spoils of war, including vast supplies of gold, weapons, and food, were claimed by the victors. The Grand Vizier returned to Istanbul in disgrace. Sultan Mehmed IV, enraged by his failure, ordered Kara Mustafa's execution. Strangled with a silken cord, his death marked the symbolic collapse of Ottoman dominance over Europe. Chapter 13. The turning point of Europe. The failed siege of Vienna reshaped European history. The Ottoman Empire, once an unstoppable force, now faced the beginning of its long decline. Its aura of invincibility shattered, and European powers seized the opportunity to reclaim lost territories and push Ottoman influence back into the East. The Holy League's victory emboldened Austria, Poland, and Venice, paving the way for a century of European resurgence. New alliances formed, new military doctrines emerged, and the balance of power shifted permanently in favor of the West. This battle wasn't merely about one city's survival. It marked a turning point where Europe transitioned from a position of vulnerability to one of dominance, setting the stage for the rise of Western empires in the centuries to come. Chapter 14. Legends, Myths, and Coffee. The siege left behind not just historical consequences, but also cultural curiosities and legends. Among the treasures abandoned in the Ottoman camp were sacks of coffee beans, which the Viennese quickly adopted, transforming Vienna into Europe's coffee capital. Tales also emerged of spies, secret tunnels, and last-minute heroics. Stories of the Winged Hussars' charge became immortalized in Polish folklore, celebrated as one of the greatest feats of cavalry in history. Even today, remnants of the siege, from old cannonballs embedded in walls to preserved fortifications, serve as silent reminders of when Vienna stood at the crossroads of history. Chapter 15. Legacy of East meets West. The Ottoman Siege of Vienna remains a defining moment where East met West, not just militarily, but culturally and politically. While the Ottomans retreated, their influence didn't vanish. Europe continued to absorb elements of Ottoman science, cuisine, and art in the centuries that followed. At the same time, the siege hardened European identity and sowed seeds of future rivalries between nations and empires. The struggle for power, culture, and faith that began on Vienna's walls echoed through history, shaping modern geopolitics in ways still felt today. The siege stands as a testament to how a single battle can alter the course of civilizations, proving that history often pivots on the courage of a few, the decisions of leaders, and the resilience of ordinary people facing extraordinary odds. Vienna survived, and with it, the destiny of Europe was preserved. But imagine a different world, one where Kara Mustafa triumphed, where Ottoman banners flew over Paris and Rome. How different would our world be today? If you enjoyed this cinematic deep dive into one of history's most pivotal battles, hit like, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications for more hidden stories and untold histories. And tell us in the comments below, what do you think would have happened if Vienna had fallen?